You can get good photos on this. Probably not this though. These Meta glasses aren't that great for photos, but you get the point, right? What actually matters is that you follow these 5 basic rules or guidelines that I'm gonna share in this video. And the last one, you're gonna wanna pay attention to in every single photo shoot. The first guideline you're gonna wanna follow to ensure you get those perfectly sharp photos is the reciprocal rule. This rule states that you wanna use a shutter speed that is the reciprocal of your focal length or higher. Let's say you have a 50mm lens, then you would want a shutter speed of at least 1/50. If you're already following this rule, but you still get blurry photos, you might not be properly compensating for the speed of your subject. For sports, you're gonna wanna go a lot faster than that. Sometimes 1/1000, depends on how fast everything's moving. You really wanna move the shutter speed around and play with it and take photos. Look at your examples. You can zoom in on your camera and look at how sharp it came out on that shutter speed, because sharpness is really reliant on your shutter speeds. You see how you increase your shutter speed the faster your subject moves? It's that simple. Just remember that key thing. It's part of your basic principles of photography. And if you're using a phone, you're probably thinking, how can I change the shutter speed on my phone? There's a lot of apps available to give you full control of your phone. My iPhone 15 Pro, for example, I like to use the Moment app. It just gives you full control over your camera, and it still allows you to shoot in RAW, and it's just a little bit easier to use than the iPhone app, in my opinion. Some other similar apps are Cinema P3 Pro, Filmic Pro, Blackmagic Camera. Granted, on a newer iPhone, you may notice that you can adjust the aperture, and that's only in portrait mode, and it's still very limited. You want to be able to have full control, like I said. Guideline number 2. This one really doesn't apply to phones as much, but when you have a camera, you have to make sure you're using the proper focus modes. I shoot Sony, so on the Sony, you can see that it can go to wide zone, center fix, spot. What I really like to do for my focus when I'm on landscapes is I like to use spot, and I like to go about 2/3 of my distance into the photo. Guideline number 3, camera shake. You want to make sure that you're as stable as possible when you're taking your photographs. That means if you don't have a tripod, you probably need one for landscape photography, because in landscape, you really sometimes have to get those really slow shutter speeds to suck in light, because a lot of landscape is done in the mornings or late at night when there's not as much light. You can't do that without a tripod. You need a tripod to make sure your camera is as stable as possible. And if you're standing and holding your camera, which I don't like, because I hate shooting anything at like this height, because everybody shoots at that height. That's what makes a lot of good photographers different, is perspective. You want a new perspective that people don't see. So on the 50mm lens, you can go below 1/50, but you really would need a tripod for that. And 1/50 is assuming you're a stable person already, in my opinion. Like I feel like my hands are pretty stable. I hold my camera real tight, elbows tight. You want to have your camera really locked in anytime you hit that shutter button. Don't let the camera shake. It's that simple. It's a pretty basic rule. And now we're moving on to guideline number 4. We're going to talk about aperture. If you don't know what aperture is, you're gonna wanna go read about it. Go look up the exposure triangle, learn about aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, and learn about how that matters to every single camera, no matter what you're shooting with. The main tip I have for aperture is to try to make sure that you're using the sweet spot on your lens. The sweet spot is that aperture that your lens performs the best at. For my Sony 70-200 GM, for example, the sweet spot, it's a 2.8 lens, is actually like a 3.6 or something. Let's see. I'm gonna actually use AI to ask what the sweet spot on my 70-200 is. So it's generally considered to be a f4 to f5.6 on my Sony 70-200, which is a 2.8. And now we're gonna move on to guideline number 5, which is the final guideline. It's the guideline I wish I knew when I started. ISO and noise. And if you're thinking, oh, this is basic, I already know this, I want to reiterate the importance of not worrying about noise. I know everybody tells you you need to worry about noise, but you really don't. We have really good software nowadays, and if you have a modern camera or something newer worth even $600-700 nowadays with a kit lens, it's gonna have the ability to go to a pretty high ISO. You might have heard always shoot at 100 ISO for the sharpest photos. No, that's not correct. If you don't have enough light, you better raise that ISO, because you're gonna be screwed when it comes to post. You need to raise your ISO. That's something I wish I knew in the beginning. I shot a wedding inside in the beginning, and if I just had raised my ISOs a little bit, I would have left there with way better photos. I got great photos that night, but I wish I knew this rule before I did. Noise is also something you can remove in post super easy. Lightroom has a denoise, and Topaz Photo AI has an incredible denoise. I really recommend them. This is not a paid advertisement or anything, obviously, but Topaz Photo AI is absolutely amazing. They can make your photo go from this to this with the click of a button, and that just gets rid of noise. But sometimes you're like, hey, you see something cool and it's like almost pitch black. Better to get the shot than to leave it behind. That's just my opinion. If you think that you need an expensive lens to get great photos, you're wrong. If you've ever heard that lenses would improve your photos way more than a body, that's definitely true, and that's something I got hung up on in the beginning. I actually use one of the least expensive lenses almost every time I go out. There's a little difference of sharpness between one lens and the next. It depends on who's looking at it, because in my opinion, photography all comes down to storytelling. What makes a really good photo is you. If you just pick up your camera and get out there, I promise you, your photography is going to improve way more. I still learn every single day. I'm not the best photographer. I'm nowhere near the best photographer, but I love photography. And if you love photography, you want better photos, then you're gonna wanna follow these guidelines. You wanna learn more about photography, or if you wanna see the beauty that New England has to offer, then you're gonna wanna subscribe, because I have a lot more videos coming about photography. I also do a vlog series in New England. Until next time, peace.